anything with the word character in it, I did that. So today we're going to talk a little bit about character design. We're going to talk about character design process. We're going to talk about, we're just going to workshop for a while. I'm going to try to hopefully be able to get to the process of doing one character speed sculpt. And maybe if we can get to the illustration side, that would be great. If not, we'll get as far as we can. First, I want to say, and hopefully everybody can help me with this, a big thank you to Red School for putting on this event. And here, everybody smile so I can get a selfie. 1, 2, 3. Thank you. All right. Let's get started. Oh, and one more thank you. Thank you, Romania, for making these incredible donuts. I have had way too many of these at company shows, but thank you so much. So, a little bit about me. Well, this is my first drawing that I was ever proud of. It's from Battletoads, if you guys remember that game. I remember being very proud of this drawing, and my mom is still very proud of this drawing. But times change. But a little bit about me, so I'm born in Colorado, well, technically Texas, so I'm from Texas, but I was raised in Colorado, which is pretty much right in the middle of the United States. And I grew up drawing a little bit, as you can see, but as I got a little older, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. Once I graduated high school, I decided that I really wanted to be a businessman. And so I went to business school for 6 months, and I failed. And then I decided I wanted to be an auto body mechanic, which I did that for about 6 months to a year as an auto body apprentice. And I sanded down cars and I took apart cars. And it was really fun because I really am into cars. I like that kind of stuff. And eventually I realized, well, you know what, if I make an auto body website where I sell parts for modded cars, where I sold parts for WRX and Evo cars, rally style cars. It was really fun. And then eventually I just kind of decided that I didn't really want to do that anymore. It wasn't super successful. And I saw a late night infomercial for a school, a late night commercial. And I went to one of those schools and I ended up going to that. Eventually I ended up going to the school, known School of Visual Effects in Hollywood. And I was there for about 2 years. And this is just some of the student work. From that, this is actually a piece based off of a pencil sketch by Kang Lee, and it's actually the first piece that ended up getting me a job. So, because you'll see in just a few more slides, I got really into doing robots, and maybe that comes from my history of really liking cars and working on cars, and doing Robotoads or whatever that version of that thing was, but it ended up kind of transitioning. Some more work, some Deadpool work, some comic work. I think you'll see some of those things also inspired as to what I kind of do now. And after I graduated from Noman, I got my first job at Legacy Effects. Legacy Effects is the old Stan Winston Studios. Stan Winston Studios is a practical effects house, and they do props and costume work for a lot of the very old famous movies like Terminator, Predator, Jurassic Park, Edward Scissorhands, name a famous 80s movie, and they probably did the practical effects for it. So I got to go work there. And the first movie I got to work on was Real Steel. This is my first professional model as a professional artist. And this is Noisy Boy. This is Real Steel, which is the robot boxing movie with Hugh Jackman. And these models are actually rapid prototypes. So when I was working here, I learned a lot about rapid prototypes or 3D printing. And each one of these pieces is a separate piece that had to be kind of taken off and taken apart. And rapid prototypes is built to be about 8.5 feet tall. So these are hydraulic, 8.5 foot tall robot puppets. This is a smaller piece, which was the glove of the main character. And each plate here had to come off and on. Each joint had to be able to rotate so that it could not interpenetrate with itself. So a little bit of industrial design, a little bit of mechanics work right here. So the pins would have to go through the whole motion, and he could make a full closing and opening of his fist. Also did some helmets for the commercials for Halo. And then also there I got to start to kind of stretch my legs doing some design work. So Total Recall, you see on the left, it's a design for the head they ended up not going with. I really liked the old Total Recall, so I wanted to try to bring back some of that, 80s TV technology. On the right is from a movie that was eventually released with a different name, but I think it was called All You Need Is Kill, and that eventually got turned into Live, Die, Repeat, or one of the other names they changed it to. It's the Tom Cruise movie with the aliens. This was a different director, but we ended up doing something different. And a little robot in the center. The synths, or the cops, from Total Recall. These were practical suits that actors would wear. And in between all of these joints, which I modeled all these joints, but which we gave to the effects company, anything in here was going to be replaced with green screen. So they would wear the practical part, and they would have a green undersuit, and the green would be replaced and easily taken out, but you would still have the pieces moving. And then there was the first character that I got to work on through the Avengers, which this is where I met my first connection for Marvel, was the Hulk. So we did this maquette, this statue, for the release of the film to prove to Joss Whedon that we could make a cool-looking Hulk. And so we made this, and we turned it into a statue and presented it to him, and he liked it. And now you could buy this from Sideshow Toys. The second thing that I did there was Mark 7. So this was my first Iron Man suit that I did. Similar thing that we did there is we turned this into a statue. Just some orthographics of it. And this is the statue that we ended up making for it, similar for a presentation tool and also an approval tool for directors. This statue is about 3 feet tall because it's a half scale statue. So this is when it's being painted. And this is it being photographed as the statue itself. So this is my model, rapid prototyped, sanded, cast in gold and painted. So pretty cool to be able to show that to a director and say, I know this will be a digital character, but this is what you will look like. After that, I decided I really want to try my hand at games, because I'm a big gamer as well, just like Devin. And I went and I worked on Uncharted 3 at Naughty Dog. I worked there for about 6 months during Crunch, and the main character that I worked on was Salim, who was the veteran leader. He's at kind of the end of the game. And I also worked on all of the multiplayer for custom characters, and I worked on any of the NPCs, the background characters. So I got a lot of cool experience being able to learn how to mix and match pieces for characters. So one shirt is supposed to fit on all the characters, how you make that work with all the pants and all the boots and all the gloves. And a little bit of pain, but a lot of really good experience. And so after that, my contract was ending, and I was talking to them, to Naughty Dog, about maybe working on The Last of Us, because they were thinking about picking me up to work on that game. And I ended up getting a call, and this is me. And so I said, hello, and then I said, hi, this is Marvel. We worked with you before. And I said, oh, okay, good. And they said, we need to do 42 suits for Iron Man 3. And I said, oh, 42 suits? Yes, that's awesome. And so I ended up working on Iron Man 3, and not doing all 42 suits, but the main ones that I did do were the Mark 42, which is the primarily gold suit from Iron Man 3, and the Iron Patriot suit, which started out as War Machine, and this suit is actually now in Avengers 2, repainted back to War Machine. So this is what he ended up getting repainted as. And then for a while, I kind of, I worked on a bunch of other things. They really liked me. I worked on, I think, 7 Iron Man suits during that time. I don't remember all the names of them, but a bunch of the background ones in that last sequence. And then so in the meantime, in between some of the projects, they wanted to keep me on because we knew we would have some cool stuff to do in the future. And so this is one of the concepts that I did for them for Thor 2, The Dark World, for some of the elves. When they were a little bit more grungy, they wanted to go some different routes with that. also did some stuff for Winter Soldier, Captain America too. So any of the helmets from that movie I did, and we rapid prototype those out. And Legacy, actually, the same company I worked for before, ended up making those practical props. So kind of strange that a lot of my career has kind of cycled, you know, for the people I met at Marvel and working at Legacy, now I work with Legacy, kind of just interesting in that way. And then for a while, I did a quick group concept. This is my very, very, very first group concept. So that's the model on the left and the actual concept art on the right. And this was before there was a director. They only had a first script, and they said, you know, we're going to think about doing this movie with a talking raccoon and a tree and some weird people in space, and just come up with some random things after you read the script. And so we did, and this is the one that I did, and a bunch of the other artists in my team did some really great work. But after a while, nothing really happened with it. I think probably 6 months later, we just kind of sat around and there was nothing. And then all of a sudden, you know, we ended up doing Peter Quill, so this is the model that I did for Quill's mask. And this is a concept from Charlie Wen, but also a little bit of myself and him, because he was sculpting some concepts and I was sculpting some concepts. And one time, while we were just kind of flipping through them in ZBrush, I accidentally turned on all of them at the same time. And this is kind of what it looked like. And we were like, oh, that looks pretty cool. And then that's kind of what the end helmet looked like. It was an accident, but I think it ended up looking cool. And then eventually, we got a director with James Gunn, and he had liked the original one that I did, that first group concept. He kind of liked the idea, but he wanted to try some different things. So this is my second take at the character group. And just to show a little bit of process as well. So this is my ZBrush sculpt on the left with very little lighting and very little color on it, but just starting to overlay some atmosphere and build up the layers to kind of the final image. So it starts very simple, and I'm slowly going to build up color and information and shadows and that kind of stuff on it. And I also did a front and a back, and I said, we really like this one, but we don't really like this one that much. Even though this is the exact same model, it's just the camera angle is a little different. So I had to find a way to make this look like this all over, which is interesting. So I ended up, this is the model of this one right here. So I ended up trying to make him a little bit younger, which is something they wanted, something a little bit more anatomical, a little more skeletal in some ways, so that we knew that we wanted him to be able to move. We did not want him to be Treebeard from The Hobbit, where it was just a big tree trunk that was kind of moving on top of another tree trunk. So that's why we got into the kind of the root system and that kind of look. So you can see just a few more of these. And the one on the right is the one that they kind of liked more, so we started going in that direction. We tried a few different heads, as you can see. And then finally, this is the final model that I did for group, final concept model. And we'll build that up for the illustration as well. So this is the straight ZBrush render. And just adding some shadows and some cavity, some lighting, some shadows, some color, some atmosphere, some curves and more atmosphere there. Adding some moss on top of him. They had found that from one of the other guys' images they really liked, that he was kind of not just brown, but also green, and a feeling of constantly growing, making him a little less old, a little younger. And so this is the final image of that. And so my final design, what we do is at the very end of the design, when something is approved, we hand off the illustrations, both the front, back, portraits, side illustrations that I do, and then we also hand off that model that you saw before. We did a bunch of background aliens for the sections of the world in Guardians of the Galaxy where there would be aliens in the background, of course. But, you know, we ended up getting those all cut because most of them were too expensive to do. They mostly chose prosthetics instead of doing anything else. So these are just a few of those. Some of which were approved, some of which were not. The one on the left was actually in the prison when they get captured. This monster kind of comes up to Quill and kind of claims him, and the group ends up stepping in, but I did the concept for the upper half of this guy, and I a different version is here on the right. But he ended up being blue, so they kind of took this color and put it on that guy. And some more prisoners. And then Avengers 2. So after all those other movies, we kind of came to Avengers 2, and I got to do a few concepts for the Iron Legion, which you see at the beginning of the movie. So I wanted to play with a little bit of composition and to try doing a group shot, because that's not something I really had much experience in. And then I also did a few just different versions of some more Art Deco and architectural and with no face or no face at all, or weird Iron Man lines. I did not end up doing the final design, but they're still pretty fun to do. And these are not rendered in ZBrush, these are rendered in Keyshot. And then I would paint on top of that. As well as this, so I did an early Ultron concept when we knew nothing about what the director wanted. So I went very classic, standard metal guy with kind of jack-o'-lantern face. They didn't really want to go this direction because they knew they wanted him to be able to talk, since they were choosing a well-known actor, to be emotive, to kind of be expressive, to be able to do that kind of stuff. So they went a different direction. And so this is the final model that I did for Ultron Prime. I did not do any of the models for the, what are they called? The drones, his army. I did not do those. But this is my final model for Ultron. And he was a really big challenge because he had some really interesting design lines, which we'll kind of cover in just a few moments. Not too in depth, but just some things to look about when we start the concept and characters. I also did the concept models, proof of concept models for the Hulkbuster. Just a front and back render. And then I think this is the Mark 45. So I've covered almost every Iron Man suit or shown in good screen time Iron Man suit, at least these early models since the Mark 7. So now we are on 45. Which is a lot of numbers, but it's been a real challenge. This guy was by far the most detailed, by far the most challenging one. I know it's a little hard to see up there because it's dark, but this one took way longer than all the others. I don't know how long it took, but it was considerably longer. And we wanted to go kind of more muscular, more anatomical, less mechanical than we've been going before. So I get into a little bit of personal work here. Some of these are game, as you can see on the left. Super Meat Boy. Super Meat Boy is one of my favorite games of all time. I know it came out like 4 years ago, but it's one of the best platformers ever made, I think. So I just kind of love this kind of a black and white thing. I like to do black and white art. An animated Raphael before the movie, so I made him really big, and they made him even bigger for the movies, but something fun, and then a weird alien that I was doing for a demo. I contributed to a book called Essence Creatures, which is just about kind of creature character concepting, non-sentient, so these would be beasts that kind of live in the wild. This one is kind of a big planet-eating squid thing. With these, mostly trying to play with composition, trying things that I had not tried before. About a year ago, a little over a year ago, I did Silver Surfer for the Comic-Con contest, which is a GameArtisans.org challenge to try to redesign a character in a way that I've been learning to model and learning. A lot of the guys that I work with are incredible painters. I am not an incredible painter. I sculpt pretty well, and I can paint over on top of something, but from scratch I'm not as great. So I wanted to see if I could incorporate some of the design language and what I had learned at work into something personal. So I also ended up doing a Nomen DVD for this, which is out there now. And there's a designer, so now I'm just going to want to talk a little bit about the designer versus modeler. So I started out as a modeler, which you kind of saw from Legacy Effects. And modeler, typically what they do is they execute the design, but recently I've been kind of transitioning into a little bit more of the concept world. So what does a designer do? What does a conceptor do? They create the visual, or excuse me, they create the idea, visual or not. So whether that's I just tell you verbally what I want, and you have to come up with that, you have to create the idea. Or if you're a modeler and I say make something from in an 80s robot, okay, I'll make an 80s robot. Communicate the medium, and sometimes the designs are intentional and sometimes they're happy accidents. Not on purpose, but still looking. Usually the design goes straight to the modeler, and the modeler's primary job is to execute the design. So what are the intentions of the designer? What were they trying to do? If it's a loose sketch, what do we have to do to make it look cool? Or what made the loose sketch cool? Sometimes if you just model a sketch, it will lose that coolness and it will come off looking stale. And the number one most important thing of a modeler is to be nice. Because you're going to be working with people who have spent a long time drawing or painting or coming up with a cool idea. And if you come in saying, well, this doesn't work, your perspective is bad here, and your drawing doesn't look good here, or what did you mean, this doesn't make sense, you look like an asshole. So don't do that, be nice. And number one, what I've learned is that a modeler needs to be able to think like a designer. So, like you can see in some of the above things, what were the intentions? What were they thinking about? If you can start to think like a designer, eventually you can almost turn into one too. So, I've done this talk many times before, but I just want to give a quick brief introduction to it of something we want to look for when we're making a design. The number one thing is flows and rhythms throughout the character. And these can happen through a bunch of different ways. The number one thing that you tend to see it on is form. Now form is planes or the change of a shape, and that typically creates highlights. So as we can see here, just looking at the calf, there is a shadow side and there's a light side. That's pretty standard. You can see that on anything. But the number one thing I want to kind of point out to you is this green line. And if you look at it here, I can pull this up in Photoshop and draw over it. But you'll see that there are highlights or lines that pick up through this entire character. So as I go from the highlight on this finger to the shadow in this gauntlet, to this intentional little bevel that goes into the lines of the armpit, pick up in these scoops in the bicep that kind of rotate around through the shape of the chest and come down through the highlight of this ab section. And that ab section points down into the details and lines of this calf, and then they continue through the knee pad and then down through the calf and through the toes. So there is one line that comes from the fingertip to the toes, and that's intentional. The designer did that on purpose. So if I came into this as a modeler and said, oh, okay, I modeled this character, but I didn't get that, it's going to be missing something. It's not going to be as precise, it's not going to be as slick and as cool. The other thing that we can start looking for rhythms and flows are color. So just looking at the difference between, if I squint my eyes, color is the number one read. So if you squint your eyes, you'll notice that the biggest thing you'll see is that gold chunks and the red chunks, you'll start to see proportional changes. And some of these look, if you look like it, you know what the classic Iron Man looks like, where he kind of looked like he was wearing boots and kind of tights, and then trunks, and then had biceps that were really tight. If you squint your eyes, that kind of is what you get, as you get that gold thighs, the red calves, the gold biceps, and the red gauntlets. You can also do it through detail, which is primarily what the Mark 42 and Iron Patriots and some of those Iron Man 3 movies were from. And then another thing is connecting shapes. So within this, there's one connecting shape. It's pretty common, and I figured I should probably be able to see it, but you guys could give a shout out. Does anybody happen to see what the common theme or common shape is? It's a U, kind of this shape, right? So now if we're looking, we want to start looking for U shapes. Oh, hang on. I can't do that. But you'll see all of these small U's. So there's one here, 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 there's one here. The whole chest is one. From the top view, the shoulders are one. The little toe has one, the toe has one there, the complement. Like everywhere there's a U shape, right? So this character is it's designed very well by Phil Saunders, but all of these things were intentional from the very beginning before I even got it. And so if I didn't pay attention to those things, this design does not come across as well. And so today we're going to do just a little bit of a workshop. I'm going to try to sculpt, hopefully, the whole robot for you guys quickly, about an hour and a half. And they say it takes about 10,000 hours to become a master. I don't think I'm even close to that. I'm maybe at 4,000 hours if you really look at it. But we had better get started.